Nyanje jimbordo dan nyingmi jang zoner monum jimbor ngam janta bagro dan ngam zando shirmardo tumba tuje janla ki jam zar me jang ro zer ni jang gamza jawor tugi shan lo yelarma jingme banzo jawla sorande gongjer toban bawra shenji lo profound dharma rarely seen ever. Now I can accept it. No Tathagata's meaning liberate beings, generate bodhicitta. Tinari dungur laptening imjung samba jwana. Churchad womit and current chamba teacher thunder tavi dungurum jwana, mugu bajik shua mayan jung kuri ngansar tertavi nyambano. Rijik dendro nafshopi dungur nyense vanda. Yang dartar zoparach kana nganjur dungur tachirmu. Kemaho koranach tamtame pir dungur ji jamso yono nyamdar kyoab kete yang yit tarwa lab shobrab shago. Jamdro jangwana tertar tsirv jidmirin jigbanda tabi yangda nyinba la maflover jabsu kirwana kumchuksum kona yembe jijang te kona nit te kona laf tembrab shajang. Teersum jilabab kyang tangwar mafshago nyamda ngibar shene kyamzho gumu. Chagbab sarwana gongdab shapar tarda rangla wang may chang rtagdar dunghar jang gzhan wangjan le mandebi tsirlab tende lakchung jombag jawo ngarjir tang gzhan kyatak sopi vlongan tsar japarab shago tsar japarab shago digbab jangwana dunghar ndar tabadang ndawe chi lagba khogda me panar digbab mbajile shungwa ji le ngibadang per chewadang mashibadang mamchabadang shiba chidma zabab jir goni lagbarab samla tibshir dunghar mandodna ti je mergawar pong gu nyamda ngarsag tov ji shagzang shima dambala mbato. Let us continue our discussion on the topic of the application of suffering and happiness on the path, as we further explore how these experiences influence and shape our spiritual journey. Previously, I have already shared some principles with you all. The main point is that we cannot avoid truly accepting suffering as a part of life. It's a bit difficult for me to speak while wearing a mask, isn't it? The mask makes it harder for my words to come out clearly, and I often find myself struggling to make sure I'm understood. Can you hear me clearly? It's still okay, right? I guess. As we have already mentioned earlier in our discussion, we can't reject or refuse to accept suffering. Moreover, in those moments when suffering arises, even briefly, not only should we not reject it, but we should even feel joy. For us, actually, these two things may not be very easy to accomplish for most people in practice. Why is that? Because each of us ordinary people, whenever we encounter suffering, we all, almost always, without exception, feel unhappy. If asked to accept suffering, in theory, it is possible, but in practice, it really isn't that easy. In reality, it actually really isn't. Furthermore, if you are asked to generate joy in your heart in the face of such suffering, when we are confronted with situations that challenge our beliefs or expectations, it becomes even more difficult. So, what methods can we use to achieve this? The most crucial thing is to practice regularly and consistently, especially when it comes to various methods for effectively transforming suffering into the path, or those related to bodhicitta, or essential teachings on compassion. These should be practiced often. Of course, when we talk about practice, it doesn't have to be a retreat or through entering meditative absorption. In fact, the teachings of Mahayana Buddhism are often reflecting and repeatedly familiarizing, reflecting, pondering, and focusing on them in your mind. This, in fact, is also a form of practice, a kind of exercise in itself. Over time, as the years go by, gradually, with regard to these states of mind, whether in obvious or subtle ways, so that they can truly and deeply take root in your heart and remain there and eventually become deeply ingrained. Many of these realizations, as the great masters of the past have shown, did not arise without diligence or effort, nor did they appear out of nowhere or through mere imagination, and were not attained easily or effortlessly. It wasn't like that. The great masters of the past, these transcendent and profoundly deep realizations, they should currently be in the process of studying right now, engaged in their studies at this moment, achieved after enduring countless hardships. Therefore, any accomplishment we achieve, in fact, in front of it, it is important to understand that any achievement would not be possible without Is that clear? Is this explanation acceptable, please? With this in mind, we should understand clearly. In fact, the path of transforming suffering is often not nearly as simple as it may seem, but it's not what you would call truly unattainably difficult either. As long as each person has confidence and belief in this area, if you pay, you will definitely get something in return. Because within our Buddha nature, we possess this ability, the seed. Therefore, during the process of carefully listening and contemplating, we should practice very diligently. Just as we discussed yesterday, after repeated and vigorous practice, we should always strive to make our minds as effective and efficient as possible, because by doing so, we can think more clearly, solve problems more easily, and make better decisions in our daily lives. As earrings, like these absolutely lovely, beautiful ones, this is very important to remember. So what did we discuss with everyone earlier? We talked about when suffering befalls us, particularly in our own lives and experiences and in the lives of those around us, not to reject it, but to let it come and accept it. There's no need to wonder why I'm so unlucky. Why am I really so unfortunate? Why am I wonder, so very pitiful in this particular life of mine? How pitiful this is. Truly so pitiful and sad to, if you keep thinking like this, repeating these thoughts over and over again in your mind, you might not even be able to eat during the day, and you can't sleep at night either. You just lie there, wide awake. You can't even rest in between. If it goes on like this, just as we discussed yesterday, maybe the issue itself isn't enough to bring you down, but the truth is your emotions have already taken control over you, and because of that, you have lost the battle before it even truly began. At a certain point, even your body can't handle it, and your mind becomes even more fragile. In this way, as we simply live in this world, even the tiniest things, no matter how small, can seem like a huge deal to some people. It feels as if the whole world has collapsed, the sky has fallen, and the earth has cracked open. The entire world seems to have become utterly dark. It feels like, let alone having hope to live, you don't even really know how to muster the courage to die. In this way, indeed, for us, especially as Buddhists, if you have heart, can't control, can't transform in any way whatsoever, not at all. This should be the process of practice. The saddest, most pitiful, most regrettable thing. Therefore, when suffering or discomfort arises in our lives, at any moment, don't try to forcibly or in any way suppress this suffering. Because if you try to stop suffering, sometimes it's truly impossible. We all know that suffering arises from the causes of afflictions, from the various causes of karma and the many different afflictions that arise. When this result has already manifested, it's really not so easy to stop it. For example, if a sentient being is already sick, there are usually many causes behind the illness. Just like sometimes when we've caught a cold, I'm really seriously ill. At that point, no matter how much medicine you take or how many injections you get, nothing you can do. The result appeared. If beforehand you had taken medicine, gotten vaccinated, or regularly protected your body, maybe you wouldn't get sick so easily. This kind of pattern actually exists in our human world. It's not that it doesn't exist, it definitely does. Using our physical body as a metaphor, this is how it works. And it's the same with mental suffering. Some kinds of suffering can be resolved immediately by relying on a certain antidote. But some suffering you have to experience yourself before you've fully gone through it. That suffering will not just disappear midway at all. So first we should understand this principle logically and then thoughtfully put it into practice in our daily actions. In this way, when it comes to experiencing suffering for each of us as individuals, maybe you'll be able to accept it at a certain point in the future. Not only can I accept it, but I am also happy. The great masters of the past were delighted about it. Look at Venerable Atisha. He always had a disciple with a bad temper by his side every day. If it were us, we definitely wouldn't want to bring someone like that along. But the great masters of the past go harsh environments. We fear those situations. In harsh environments, some great masters at that time who were highly respected and influential visited leprosy patients and joined such groups to experience suffering. Severance teachings. He also wanted, in particular, to cause trouble for himself, deliberately go to groups that are, in particular, prone to trouble. These things, when our practice reaches some level, we will have the strength and attain such a state. But before we reach that point, we understand it. And then, in our daily lives, accumulate experience bit by bit, little by little. At first, we are especially afraid of suffering, but after a while, we become less afraid. Once we encounter suffering, we recall in scriptures, accept suffering. Uncomfortable inside, I can still just barely manage to endure it. I think I can hold on a little longer. Then, as we continue to practice gradually over time, when we truly experience suffering, a practitioner feels joy. Here's my chance. I'm happy. Today, I am in pain. I am sick. I am so happy. Today, when someone scolds me or says something about me, happy another opportunity. This state of mind may not be something that everyone can easily attain or achieve for everyone, but we really need to believe in ourselves. If we have a certain confidence in ourselves, problems are solvable. Bodhikaryavattara says, no matter how big the obstacle is, even major obstacles are not in reality truly obstacles. What appears to be a very big obstacle at first glance even a great hindrance, something that seems to stand in your way and make things difficult, is not actually a barrier that can truly stop you. This applies to people with strong mental fortitude. If we are generally fragile, easily discouraged, or especially sensitive, or perhaps even particularly and truly, genuinely overly narrow-minded, even the tiniest, most insignificant things that are truly trivial can seem like huge issues to them. In the end, this brings a lot of harm and suffering to both themselves and others. So everyone should take these principles they've learned and use them in daily life. This is genuine spiritual practice. Spiritual cultivation needs accumulation. If you don't have this kind of accumulation, unless perhaps in your previous life you were truly a returning Buddha, or you are indeed a manifestation of a Buddha or Bodhisattva, then perhaps you don't need much accumulation. When even just a seemingly small condition sometimes triggers them, they can quickly awaken the various powers of wisdom and compassion from their past lives. But for most of us, through effort, practice, that we can attain abundant results. Today, we will also continue to discuss on suffering as a companion on the path, creating joy, treating suffering as a meaningful aid to spiritual cultivation, whether it is such as falling ill, or gradually, over time, eventually losing all of your wealth, or maybe even experiencing a divorce within your family, or being dismissed from your original workplace, and so on. In times of such suffering, you should see it as the best kind of supportive condition in your process of spiritual practice, and create joy, wise, enduring suffering. Minds clear, bright, undisturbed. Bodhisattva's way of life. Even though the wise may go through all kinds of suffering as wise and thoughtful individuals, their minds are not disturbed, and instead they become even more clear and focused. The wise, even when patiently enduring suffering with great resilience and unwavering composure, do not let their minds become disturbed, but remain, their minds aren't turmoil, but instead become even clearer and more lucid. Mind clear. We, on the other hand, as the great Mipham Rinpoche said, encountering suffering, happiness, we make no real progress and gain nothing. Every day passes just like this, bewildered. But the wise are different. When they encounter happiness, they aren't arrogant. They make it spiritual. When they encounter suffering, they learn even more Dharma teachings, and suffering truly becomes a companion on the path, bringing joy in their hearts. So what does this really mean? No matter what kind of suffering one encounters, if you do not combine it with a virtuous practice that matches then no matter how much you reflect on it, if one has skillful means, through suffering obtain many merit and benefit, it will still be as truly indeed distant as the sky and the earth. This statement is actually very important for our discussion. What does it mean? If we are to be wise, transform suffering into our spiritual path. Conditions for practice. Some of us are not like this, and this will be discussed later on. If we cannot transform both happiness and suffering into part of the path, then when we are happy, we become distracted and cannot practice. And when we are suffering, we become anxious and can't practice. If so, when can it be repaired? When there is no practice, some of us often say, it's raining today. The weather is really bad. I'm not feeling well. The sun is hot and dry. My mouth is dry and my tongue is parched. It's really uncomfortable. Clear weather fails. Rain fails. And apart from the weather, if alternates rain, sunshine. This weather is so annoying. Sometimes it rains, sometimes it hails. It's really cold and uncomfortable. The weather is this way for everyone, and maybe some people just can't get used to it. It's the same principle. Suffering, we don't practice properly. When happy, we don't practice properly. No practice. Therefore, when we encounter happiness, we should practice well, encounter suffering, practice, but some of us might not be like this. Sometimes we say, I'm very busy right now. I'm in a bad mood, so I won't practice. Time passes, more time passes. I'm in bad mood again. My health isn't good. I'll practice later. Tomorrow, more tomorrows. In the end, over the course of a lifetime, we may not succeed practice. Those who practice better, they really won't keep procrastinating like this. Even when in great pain and lack peace of mind, when their body and mind are deeply tormented by illness, they still use their time to begin practicing. That's why it is said here, whatever suffering you face, if you don't combine it with a virtuous practice that aligns with the strength of your own mind, it won't work to transform suffering into the path here. You must combine it with a practice that suits yourself. Transforming suffering into path becomes a very vague and general concept. It's like when we say, liberate all sentient beings. I want to liberate all the countless sentient beings in the world. Eyes open, want to liberate sentient beings. All the countless sentient beings in the world. If world is boundless, one angry person standing before you, you might not be able to handle it. In that case, how could you liberate? This concept is also very vague. In the same way, if we just don't have a practice that truly suits us, one that we regularly cultivate, when you encounter suffering, your method of practice comes into play. For example, a person often a medicine that truly suits their own body, when sick, can use this medicine. And in this way, their illness is actually much easier to cure. If you don't have this, if you don't have any medicine, and you say in theory that you must take very good medicine indeed. Some Tibetan, Chinese, Indian medicine, African medicine, Egyptian medicine, excellent talk like this. Then when you get sick, it won't help at all. In the same way, when we talk about transforming suffering into the path itself, if theoretical, it won't work. As I mentioned earlier, if you haven't actually practiced yourself, then even if you spend many years in some institute or spiritual center, no matter how many years, it's useless. These days, we often see introductions of some lamas. He is in a mountain in retreat for 20 years, 30 years, in a certain dojo studying for 20 or 30 years. And I often think, I see these words, did he practice? If he didn't practice, whether it's 20 years or a lifetime, it won't be useful. Study too. For example, at our Larunga, someone might have stayed for 20 years. Did he really practice? Did he study? If he didn't study and just treated this place as a shelter from the rain, I fear his wouldn't be any different from when he first arrived. The practice here is important. If there is no virtuous practice that integrates with one's own mind.
We often think this way in our hearts. And sometimes we even say it out loud as well. If we possess skillful means, then surely we can transform our suffering into the path. When suffering arises, we think how wonderful. There is merit, there is benefit. Wow, this practice is truly excellent. No matter how eloquently we say these things, in reality, it doesn't really do much. So what does it actually amount to in the end? The continuity of our own minds and the Dharma, as we know, indeed, is as far apart as heaven and earth. The distance between them is truly immense, almost unimaginable. It has absolutely no real significance or importance whatsoever for you in any way. So for each and every one of us, saying suffering means making it is of no real use at all. It's just a term, just a concept. In practice, key points for turning suffering into the path must be practiced as discussed. Diligently or intensively focus on practicing in daily life. See if we can frequently reflect on this. If you think about it often, it will definitely be meaningful. If you don't, it's difficult to achieve our goal. So what exactly is our goal? Dharma merges with minds. When you encounter suffering, you willingly and joyfully accept it. But many of us are unable to do this. And why can't we do it? It's because of ourselves we haven't practiced well enough. If we practice, no matter which Dharma method it is, after all, there will be some teachings that suit the strength of your mind. For example, some people, perhaps it seems that the mind of renunciation is especially well suited for them. When suffering arises, you practice renunciation, very good. For some people, when they experience suffering, even briefly, taking refuge in the three jewels is extremely important. Some people may do full prostrations, which means they lower their entire body to the ground as a gesture. Key ways to destroy arrogance are important. Some people may choose to confess and repent, repenting every time they encounter suffering. This is extremely important for them. Some people, when they encounter suffering, because of this, immediately develop a sense of joy toward virtuous actions. There are also those who can cultivate compassion and practice exchanging self and others. Some people, when it comes to the Guru's teachings, develop even greater faith, truly. As for me, every time I encounter suffering, I turn to the teachings on impermanence. Seems we haven't discussed this here. But for me, the teachings on impermanence are, in my experience, very helpful and truly beneficial, because in many situations, suffering is very hard to accept. Whenever I experience such suffering, the very first thing I think of is the Buddha once said, everything is truly impermanent. For example, if my body suddenly fails me in pain, for me, the teaching on impermanence, everything is impermanent, is especially relevant. Or when my wishes don't come true, the Buddha taught all phenomena are impermanent. It really is just exactly like that, to be honest. Looking back on my own life experiences over the years, the best way I found to transform suffering into a part of the path might be through reflections on, in the past, I think I was quite deeply affected by this idea. Actually, when I was very young, before I had received any Buddhist education, though I had faith, but without any theoretical education, I often, from a young age, probably had a rather strong sense of impermanence. Back then, I hadn't encountered any spiritual teachers either. I was in my early teens, and each day I went up the mountain to herd yaks. Sometimes up in the mountains, when I saw the bones and skeletons of yaks that had already died, I think, this is impermanence. These yaks, too, these remarkable yaks, were once deeply connected to life. Seeing human skeletons in the charnel grounds, I would feel strong impermanence. Hearing about changes or even subtle shifts in relationships between people sometimes because when I was young, I actually went through a lot myself, including major changes in circumstances, a lot of constant impermanence and change truly everywhere around us. I often heard things like, this person criticized, they criticized. And when you listen to their stories, you hear how this person used to be so wealthy and prosperous, how many people respected and honored them, and what they've become now. So for me personally, maybe it's a habit from a previous life. Ever since I was young, I've always had a profoundly strong sense of impermanence, for as long as I can remember. But this perspective isn't a pessimistic one. Some people, after contemplating impermanence, nothing has meaning, and just want to give up on everything, they have that kind of mindset. But for me, even though I have a sense of impermanence, when I encounter suffering, I don't give up on myself no matter what happens or absolutely abandon everything that truly matters to me. I don't do that. Instead, I still take things very seriously in my own way, especially the things I need to face ahead of me. I confront them. My earrings. Many of you, if you have a phone, would really want to take a photo, but there aren't any mask earrings either. If you don't have your phone, then even if you really want to take a picture, it's no use. This part is still very important for us. In the future, each of us definitely needs to study well in our lives in order to succeed, how to turn pain into a path. But ways to turn suffering, you definitely need to practice certain teachings. If you haven't practiced and just think, I want to transform suffering into the path, it's not realistic. And when real suffering comes, it's very hard to bear, and you can't apply the teachings. Because once suffering truly and actually appears before you in your life, even for a moment, even if only briefly, if you're not paying attention, you might slowly find yourself being influenced by it, and before you know it, you might just end up following it. It's very difficult to transform it into the path, let alone generating a sense of joy that's even more out of reach. But as we often say, whether it's, practicing impermanence, practicing renunciation, or cultivating bodhicitta, people like that, when they experience suffering themselves, they really can immediately, just like some soldiers in the past who have successfully completed many years of extensive, dedicated, skilled, and experienced training, when he encounters an enemy, the first thing they do is grab their weapon. This is natural. You could say it's the mind's natural response. In the same way, if we usually practice renunciation, bodhicitta, and the teachings on impermanence well, and have cultivated them well, and especially if you have practiced them deeply for a long time, encountering suffering, the first thing that will come to mind is that everything is impermanent. So why am I crying right now? It's already gone, but I still feel this way. Some time ago, not too long ago, in my small, quiet, peaceful hometown, a devastating house fire broke out, engulfing the entire home in flames. Tragically, several young children lost their lives in the blaze. The parents weren't home at the time, the door was locked, and the parents had gone out. There were 3 children in my hometown some time ago. The parents and relatives were all extremely distressed and in great pain. I heard that some monastics from Larungar, who are their relatives, also went back. They returned at just that particular point in time, and after they eventually went back, I heard from locals in my area that they said monastics really are quite different. Although they looked quite sad on the outside, they still felt that this too is impermanence, recited scripture, and didn't cry intensely at all, not even a little bit. They told others not to cry. There's nothing that can be done. Life is inherently impermanent. They explained things to them from the perspective of Buddhist teachings. So these locals said, monastics really are different. Buddhist education makes a difference. When truly facing suffering, even though they are women too, and relatives from their own family closer to them than anyone else. Others just simply couldn't bear it for various reasons at all. At that time, all the mothers had already fainted, lying completely unconscious on the ground because all their children had been burned to death. 2 or 3 children had died in the fire. It was truly impossible to accept such a reality. But as monastics, they still spoke a lot about impermanence, about karma from past lives. Of course, now, for those who are experiencing intense pain, these words may not have an immediate or noticeable effect for many people, as you might expect, at least not right away. But in reality, what does this show? If some of us even just prepare ourselves in advance for suffering and for the truth of all things in the world as we know it, if we understand it from a rational perspective, then when you truly encounter suffering, unlike ordinary people, those who have never received such education, there will definitely, without a doubt, for sure, be a difference. You can count on it, even if your practice isn't advanced. But you have listened to and carefully studied these theories many times before. This level of theoretical understanding can have a powerful impact on your life. There is great strength in facing pain. What exactly is being discussed here right now? If we don't have, this is very, very important, if we don't have our own concrete practice, then it really is difficult to transform suffering into something useful on the path. At such times, we still very much need this. Otherwise, we've studied some Dharma, even studied something as profound. And when we haven't encountered suffering, especially we think there's nothing wrong with us. All suffering is just luminosity, right? After all, really? There was a wise old monk I used to know once. They keep saying it is light, that everything is simply the natural state. all luminous, that everything is the wondrous function of the Tathagata Garba's wisdom, and so on. He spoke so eloquently. But later on, I heard that when he encountered some unexpected difficulties, he was in tears all the time, constantly crying, just like before. Once I said to him on the phone, weren't you always saying, natural luminosity, clarity, emptiness, unity? Where did the inseparability go? He wouldn't even listen, just kept sobbing on the phone. What should I do now? And then, after a brief pause, started laughing. In the end, I couldn't really tell if he was crying or laughing. It wasn't very clear at all. On the phone, it was just ha ha ha, But sometimes, when someone cries in deep sadness, it actually sounds a bit like laughing out loud. Sip tea. Otherwise, the vivid image of this practitioner simply keeps on appearing before my eyes again and again, as if it just won't fade away. To be more specific, many old Dharma friends might already know who I'm talking about. That's not really appropriate, so I'll stop here at this point for now, at this time. Usually, when we talk about Dzogchen, a deeply significant tradition, we pause to consider its meaning. We love to talk about the inseparability of clarity and emptiness, the innate wisdom. Because when you're happy, you're a practitioner. When you are suffering, you turn an ordinary person. This is a very typical example. When we are happy, when we haven't faced suffering, we might say things like Chan, Dukchan, seeing, in essence, the nature of mind. When explaining to others, everything sounds perfectly reasonable, and we present our points with solid arguments. But when we ourselves face suffering, that's when you can see whether someone has realized anything. At that moment, it becomes crystal clear. You can even tell just by looking at their expression. When he encounters setbacks and pain, see what happens. So in fact, this is closely related to our daily practice. It is in fact very much connected, truly interconnected in every way. Therefore, we need to depend on and make use of temporary suffering, at least for a while, to practice the following methods. In fact, suffering should be considered temporary. By relying on these temporary sufferings for practice, why call temporary? But in Tibetan as well, there is this idea. It means that when suffering arises, we must definitely transform it into a part of the path. To transform it into the path, I will just list a few different practices below. In fact, there are many, many different specific practices, but as I recall, there are about 6 or 7 types of practices listed below. First, cultivate renunciation. What should we think about when cultivating renunciation? While we are involuntarily wandering in samsara, there will be this or that, all kinds of suffering. It is not that something unreasonable or unexpected has happened in this particular situation at all, in any way whatsoever. But as long as we are in samsara, there will definitely, without a doubt, be many different kinds of suffering. When these sufferings arise, you might think, why is this happening to me? Why am I like this? I am a good person. Honestly, why do genuinely good people so often not get rewarded? It's just so deeply heartbreaking, truly painful to witness. Constantly blaming others and complaining is unnecessary. This is simply, truly the very nature of samsara. This is indeed absolutely very important. Even occasional suffering in fortunate realms is so hard to endure. So the suffering in the lower realms goes without saying. This is also very important. Some people, when they experience suffering, he will cultivate renunciation immediately, right away. What is he cultivating? As long as you are in samsara, at some point in your life, you are truly bound to experience all kinds of suffering. Experience suffering, samsara, is something completely natural and normal. Moreover, these scattered occasional pains we have, whether it's simply a headache or a footache, whether it's having surgery or getting an injection, or being insulted, misunderstood, or humiliated by others, or your own body itself, frequently has all sorts of different problems. In fact, scattered issues, or disputes that arise between people. These are minor scattered forms of suffering, scattered suffering, like hell, full of pain in the human world. Maybe I'm just a bit unhappy today, and what am I unhappy about? Because I didn't eat well, so I'm unhappy. What am I unhappy about today? Because I heard something from someone else. If I'm unhappy, maybe I just sometimes have a headache today. Anyway, it's all very scattered and fragmented. This kind of suffering feels so absolutely unbearable. When some people start pointing out your faults, we really do feel terrible. In that case, if we were truly reborn in hell, whether it's the hot hells, cold hells, or any kind, there's no time to rest, no Sundays. There are no Sundays in hell. If we're exhausted from work every single day, both mentally and physically, we need Sundays or too tiring. But in hell, you experience suffering, relentless, unending pain and torment all the time without any relief. As for the hungry ghost realm, you're constantly tormented by hunger and cold. And among animals, we can see that so many animals are really, truly pitiful. If I were to be reborn as one of them, what would I do? We cannot even handle the scattered bits of suffering in the human world, so there's no need to even mention the others. That's why sometimes when we, including what we're experiencing nowadays all around the world, globally, it's true, as we all know in the present day, like the ongoing global pandemic, for example, such as COVID-19, which has continued a long time, and is still, even now, a very painful experience. But if you have some sense of renunciation, maybe you'll think, as I do, well, I think, to be completely honest, if I really try to put myself in someone else's position, it might be different from ordinary illnesses. If you catch this disease, even your own family members, when dying, might not even have the chance to see you one last time. No matter where you are at that very moment in time, right then, there may be all kinds of loneliness, fear, or your own suffering and pain. But compared to the suffering in hell, without any doubt, it is clear that there should be a huge difference. So when we think to ourselves that in this life we are experiencing the most destitute, most pitiful kind of suffering, compared to the suffering of the three lower realms, there is a certain difference. In this way, you can think like this. Samsara itself, as it is so often described in many teachings, is by its very nature inherently full of suffering. Compared to suffering in the three lower realms, it is bearable. For good practitioners, this is actually very important, truly essential. If my body is in much pain, or if many things have not been going well for me lately, and I feel, we often think, compared to the suffering in hell, compared to the suffering of hungry ghosts, what does this amount to? In this way, your experience of suffering won't feel so intense. You'll think, alas, samsara truly is a boundless ocean of suffering. You should develop a sense of renunciation and aspire toward liberation. By relying on this kind of suffering, your mind can at times yearn for liberation. In the biography of Milarepa, when Milarepa returned at that particular time, his younger sister already left, and his mother had also passed away. The entire family home had been completely destroyed. All the fields, too, were utterly unrecognizable. When he saw such a tragic scene unfold right in front of him, he was deeply saddened. But this kind of sorrow was not like ordinary people. When we ordinary people see something like this, a family that was once so good and whole, and now, after going away to practice, come back to find nothing left. We ourselves might not really know what to do. Sometimes, at that moment, we might just keep crying quietly in silence for a while. But Milarepa made up his mind right then. Oh, so this is what samsara is really like, isn't it? There is so much suffering among sentient beings. I must go to a quiet place and resolve to practice. So he left his homeland behind, and in the end, attained realization. Therefore, when faced with such truly profound and overwhelming suffering, it can truly give rise to renunciation in your mind stream. For this reason, Preliminary Practices of Dzogchen notes the story, Vimalamitra teaching, which seems to be from the Treasury of Pith instructions, says, harm leads to true Dhamma. The benefactor who leads you to liberation is great. Renouncing suffering reveals the true, obtaining the great grace of eternal happiness. Vimalamitra said, sometimes we experience harm, even when we least expect it, harm can occur. Because of this harm, in the end, you find the true Dharma. If you find the true Dharma, now then that harm is actually a great kindness to you. If due to suffering you encounter the true Dharma, then such causes for you, the benefit of that suffering is immense. This statement is indeed very important. Of course, for some of us who, as it turns out, happen to practice a little bit better, situations exist. Looking at our audience today, there are individuals who have genuinely and undeniably suffered real harm, mistreatment, or even persecution at the hands of other people, whether through direct actions, words, or ongoing negative behaviors. At such times, whether it's about samsara, this feeling between people, you develop a strong sense of aversion. This includes things like breakups, for example, or being bullied, insulted, or deceived by others. In the end, this gives rise to an especially strong sense of renunciation. Then you study the Dharma, and later you truly attain this kind of liberation. So those who originally harmed you, whether people or non-human beings, have actually been of tremendous benefit to you. There are also times when, because of poor health, or because you're in a bad mood, you feel miserable for a period of time. Later, you meet the true Dharma on finding true Dharma, that this is the very nature of samsara. Some people, if they never got sick, might never wake up for their lives. Even on the day they die, they don't know what the truth of samsara is. But because you unfortunately got sick at some point or another, for whatever reason, when you were ill, it was hard for you to imagine, why do I keep wondering about myself and questioning why I am the way I am, always asking why am I like this. I was such a healthy person, decent, yet I ended up with this kind of illness and felt so miserable. But later, when looking back on your life, you see, oh, I encountered this illness, and actually it was a very good thing. This kind of suffering for me, the most valuable and meaningful thing indeed in our life, you yourself will also come to recognize this. Suffering for you is actually a great blessing. Also, just as we discussed earlier, as we talked about, this kind of suffering is actually not something that can't happen. It's normal for suffering to arise. We need to acknowledge this as well. Many of us often think, I just want to be happy forever. But that's impossible. In samsara, there's actually a lot of suffering. So suffering in samsara is entirely normal. Mahaparinirvana Sutra says 3 realms. No place for fun. In the 3 realms of samsara, no joy, suffering, birth, aging, sickness, and death. In samsara, suffering means birth, aging, sickness, and death, along with countless other kinds of pain. When you have time, if you are interested, you can always take a look at the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra. In the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra, many different types of suffering are carefully described in the text, about 110 kinds in total. Of course, there are actually even more than that. 110 sufferings are the types we talk about: the suffering of change, and the all-pervasive suffering. The 7 sufferings added to this as well, 7 sufferings: birth, aging, sickness, death, as well as the suffering of being with those you resent, the suffering of parting from those you love, and the suffering of not getting what you seek, and so on. What else is mentioned in the discussion? It also talks about the pain of cold and the pain of extreme heat, describing how exposure to very low temperatures can cause a sharp, biting sensation that leads to discomfort and numbness, while extreme heat brings a burning feeling, the pain of hunger, the pain of thirst, and so forth. There are also, for example, the emotional suffering of personal loss and the gradual, inevitable decline. The decline experienced by other people, referring to the gradual loss, reduction, or deterioration that happens, the decline of others, and your decline, the loss of wealth, the lack of personal freedom, and the decline of health and the deterioration of moral discipline, and even the degeneration of one's views. There are many sufferings. In fact, these sufferings pervade the entire cycle of existence in the 3 realms. Every person carries a great deal of suffering in their lives every day. If our mental strength is at times not strong enough, or if I don't really understand it myself at this moment, even then I can still come to accept this suffering. If we don't have this level of realization, it is indeed very, very difficult to survive in this vast and endless sea of suffering. Everyone should also understand this point. Sometimes, every now and then, in our daily lives, we encounter very wealthy people, very beautiful people, or people with power, those whom the world tends to envy. Do these people have suffering in their minds? Their suffering is intense. It's even stronger than we could possibly imagine, truly, in fact, in reality. Even more pitiable in a certain sense. This person lives in such a luxurious villa, drives cars like BMWs and Mercedes-Benz and so on. They enjoy the finest foods the world has to offer. From this perspective, this person truly rivals the gods. It seems they shouldn't have any suffering at all, really. But if we could really truly enter the inner world, maybe people who live ordinary lives than us, their pain could be even more severe in some cases. Our experience of suffering is not in any way determined by external circumstances, regardless of what happens around us. It should be decided by their own mind. But when it comes to this inner decision, there is something very important, which is to recognize the nature of suffering, to understand its source, and to understand more fully how suffering functions in this way. Even if you can't escape suffering, what will happen? Really? You can confront and deal with such suffering in your life calmly and with ease. This is also very important, something you should definitely remember. So, can you tell me exactly what it is that we are talking about here? I just want to make sure I understand the main point of our discussion. We're talking about recognizing this kind of suffering. Samsara is truly full of suffering. First of all, each of us should know that suffering is a part of life. If you truly understand that life is, as we all know, full of suffering, then when you encounter pain, you will already be mentally prepared. For example, if you think prison is painful, when you end up in prison, face suffering, it will be easy for you to accept. But if you think prison is like paradise, and then you go in, why did I think it should be paradise? But why is there actually so much hardship here? Then it might be very hard for you to accept. So, what do we really need to understand here, after all, in this situation? Indeed, there are many various unsatisfactory things in life, and many various hardships as well. The Bodhisattva Practice Sutra also says, receive all our suffering. To accept a body in the three realms, all are truly suffering. This means that as long as we accept or are reborn within the three realms, then all is suffering, regardless of whether you are male or female. In every possible situation, this truth remains the same. If you transcend the three realms, then there's no suffering. Even if you do manage to attain the state of an arhat, or for instance, a pratyeka Buddha, you have completely and truly eradicated all suffering, as well as the causes of suffering from your continuum. But if you have not reached such a state, no matter what you are, even if you become a wheel-turning king, or Indra, or Brahma, even with such extraordinary status, in reality you still cannot truly break free from the three types of suffering in the end. When in our daily lives, we often experience suffering, you will think this kind of suffering, I should develop a clear understanding of samsara. By relying on this, I can fully distance from samsara and attain liberation. So I must finally embark on the path to liberation and truly give rise to a profound sense of renunciation within myself. This is the first method of practice. So let's take a look and give it a try. Next time you encounter suffering, simply pause just for a brief moment and observe it. Everything in samsara is suffering. It's only natural I experience this. I am meant to suffer. With this mindset, perhaps the suffering won't feel as intense. Relying on this kind of suffering, many people remain unaware, but I should be aware. When we so often really see the people around us suffering, our practice is not advanced. We can still truly, deeply feel it. Many people often say, I am suffering so much, really suffering. In samsara, when everyone pursues their own goals, sometimes we can also see it clearly. No matter how beautiful or wonderful samsara may seem, that's all there is to it. Everyone is the same. Today, a leader without any religious faith said to me, Kenpo, I replied, yes. What is it? To be honest, I've actually been studying philosophy quite a lot lately, Birth, aging are the fairest and most direct things of all. I said, that's right. There is some truth. But Buddhism truly contains even deeper truths. All right, then. Maybe when the time is right in the future, I'll take a look at the Buddhist scriptures. I said, good, good, that would be even better. So it truly makes sense. We face birth, aging, sickness, and death. When people face these directly, whether it's about renunciation or the teachings of Buddhism, it will directly or indirectly lead to a firm understanding. So, well, that's indeed simply the first aspect. The second aspect is to cultivate refuge. Reflect on refuge in the endless cycles of life, faced with fear and constant threats. The only truly reliable source of refuge is the three jewels. Therefore, make a firm resolve that no matter what, you must rely on the three jewels. No matter what happens, under no circumstances should you ever abandon the three jewels. When we encounter suffering in our lives, many people at one time or another, at some point, will never abandon the three jewels. And indeed, in the three realms of samsara, the only true protection is actually the three jewels. If you don't get three jewels qualities, if you haven't studied the sutra on recollecting the three jewels, or have not learned about the true qualities of the three jewels, you might think this is just talk, and you might think so. But if you truly and deeply understand the remarkable qualities of the Buddha and the precious Dharma, including the virtues of the Sangha, then I think you can't help but develop faith in the three jewels. His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok once gave a teaching in Canada about taking refuge in the three jewels with three kinds of faith. I felt this teaching was excellent. Later on, it seems that in more than a dozen languages around the world, people voluntarily translated it one after another. This was the Dharma King's talk on the merits of taking refuge in the three jewels. It seems that in every country, everyone feels that this is extremely profound and meaningful. After each of us reads this, we may have different feelings, and that's okay. If we truly contemplate the virtues of the three jewels, we can sense it. Anyone who is wandering in samsara will experience many fears and much suffering, as well as all sorts of rather unpleasant things. But if we rely on the three jewels power is inconceivable. As stated in the Maharatnakuta Sutra, if one has unwavering and genuine faith in the three jewels, if, for instance, one develops immense faith, countless varieties of suffering can be completely eliminated. All the various kinds of suffering in our human world can, in fact, be dispelled by relying on the power of the three jewels. There is a passage in the Sutra of Vimaladatta that says, that can save all sentient beings and protect them from suffering and harm. Only the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, the three jewels, can offer protection. In our entire world, as we know it today, right now, the ones who can truly protect sentient beings are the Buddha jewel, the Dharma jewel, and the Sangha jewel. I think that many of us who truly understand Buddhist principles in our daily lives should know this. Why do I say so, as you might be wondering? Because especially when we truly come face to face with the very greatest suffering and the deepest fear, in fact, in this world, it is very difficult to find someone who can save us. Because many sentient beings whom you think can protect you, he himself was drowning in a sea of suffering. For example, when you face the greatest pain, if you actively seek out someone who is also a sentient being, they themselves are tightly bound by the shackles of karma and afflictions. It is tied really very tightly, so there's absolutely no way to get you free at all. If you wish to escape samsara, it is the Buddha who possesses great compassion along with his Dharma and the Sangha, who truly can help us leave this sea of suffering. They have this ability and these merits. And for this reason, if we take refuge in the three jewels, we will escape the sea of suffering. In the Manjushri's Question Sutra, it is said, taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and the Four Noble Truths, supreme peaceful refuge, all suffering will be eliminated. If we take refuge, three jewels, and take refuge in suffering, origin, cessation, path. Practice the Four Noble Truths, then we will definitely, without any doubt, truly be at peace at last. We will have found a true place of refuge, and as a result, all suffering will be completely liberated. Once and for all, I think many people can understand this principle. When encountering suffering, it's very difficult for anything else to solve it. But after taking refuge in the Three Jewels, many sufferings and hardships have indeed, and quite greatly, been relieved. We're not talking about the suffering of the cycle of samsara, but also the pains of before you took refuge. Your mindset was especially bad, restless, often sad. But after taking refuge in the Three Jewels, after gaining faith, you had a sense of belonging. From then on, in this world, no matter what happens, you're able to face it with great happiness and calm, steady confidence, truly embracing it all, and face it with strength. This is something many of us, whether from our own life experiences or from experiences studying Buddhism, can see clearly. So when we encounter suffering, we should integrate it thoughtfully with our practice of taking refuge in the Three Jewels. This kind of suffering will also disappear. For example, if today you feel that things just aren't really going as well as you had hoped, and some pain arises when suffering appears, recite the Four Refuges sincerely, no matter the suffering you face. I often do this myself whenever I face suffering. Complaining endlessly doesn't help at all. I calm my mind and then begin to sincerely and devoutly pray to my teacher and the Three Jewels. When you pray to the Three Jewels, sometimes miraculous effects will also appear. Also, when facing these kinds of suffering in our everyday lives, your faith in the Three Jewels becomes even more steadfast. And deep in your heart, you make a vow that at such times you must never, truly never, give up on the Three Jewels. Not ever. At this moment, you should take refuge in the Three Jewels, namely the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, even more earnestly, recognizing their importance, and sincerely practice in this way as you have been taught. We know Buddhists taking refuge in the Three Jewels when they encounter various situations seem to feel that it's very difficult in this world to find a place they can rely on. So they take refuge in Buddhism. After taking refuge, at that time, your friends and family might abandon you. Buddhist refuge. Mind normal, life normal, and your work is normal. People are pragmatic. The people around you will most likely also treat you well. I didn't become a monk because of suffering. Many journalists have asked me, why? When you were 23 years old, there must have been some problem for you to become a monk. But when I became a monk, there wasn't any problem. Indeed, I can say I had faith in the Three Jewels. But when I became a monk, many people ignored me. That's normal. Including my teachers, classmates, and many of my relatives. They all thought I was already beyond help at that point. Because, you see, at that time, it wasn't like it is now. But later on, in my own life, I believe that through study and practice, I listen, think, practice, and learn. When my studies, those who used to ignore me would sometimes look at me, or their attitude toward me would improve. So as people, if our own views are set straight and properly aligned, if we act upright, then everyone, and even absolutely all non-human beings around you, will also truly respect you and treat you well. But if our views and conduct are not upright, then all sentient beings may not necessarily treat you well. So taking refuge in the Three Jewels is also a very correct choice. How about I tell one more story? Originally, I wanted to finish talking about all 7 points, but honestly, it really turned out like this in the end, as you can clearly see. Today, I was just wandering all around. I didn't have a chance to prepare for the class this time, maybe because I was busy with other things, but I think it's still okay since maybe I will just stop here for now. To be honest, it's actually, honestly, better than I expected. Just now, when I first started the class, I thought, oh no, what am I going to talk about today? There's no class tomorrow. Just to remind you, tomorrow is Wednesday. Please remember that there will be a scheduled class session taking place on both Thursday and Friday this week. Make sure to attend the class on these 2 days as planned. Everyone lately as well, I suppose perhaps if you've been following the news, you should be aware. So usually wear a mask and try not to go out unnecessarily. If there's nothing special going on, it's best to stay at home and study carefully, reflect thoughtfully, and practice diligently. In 2 days, some guests will be coming. Tomorrow is the preliminary practice. The day after tomorrow is the main practice. It's great that everyone is practicing in all aspects. Also, I just wanted to mention, I mentioned this yesterday as well. Maybe recently, right now, at this very moment, here where we are, it might not be very convenient for some outsiders. Everyone should be aware of this too. In some individual cities, the situation is not very optimistic right now. Of course, please remember, rest assured, there's most definitely no need for any of us to panic or worry at all. No need for that. But regardless, when collective karma of sentient beings manifests, it really is, in fact, extremely difficult and challenging to control, no matter what happens, under any circumstances. Everyone must absolutely make sure to protect yourselves, please remember, at all times. Especially with this ongoing pandemic situation, it truly is something quite remarkable. From a worldly perspective, this is regarded as an extremely frightening and deeply unsettling plague. If you look at the official data, it has already and quite tragically resulted in the loss of so many hundreds of thousands of innocent lives worldwide. What will happen in the future? It's hard to say. Experts say that perhaps this disease will coexist with humanity for a long time. If that's the case, our masks, for the time being, there's nothing we can do about them. Maybe some people will leave this world still wearing masks without even realizing. So on one hand, samsara is truly full of suffering, but on the other hand, like what we've studied today, the very nature of samsara is like this. It's just that perhaps we used to think about it too naively. Through this pandemic, many people have also started to reflect in new ways. They have acquired and developed insights into many important truths about life over the years. Even many of us who usually aren't fond of spiritual practice have come to some realizations this time, whether it's impermanence of things or suffering or the truths of birth, aging, sickness, and death. We have come to understand them better. So on one hand, as you can see, we should sincerely recite the Samantabhadra's aspiration to good action to all the sentient beings in our world, each and every one of you truly. We also need to rely on the blessings of the three jewels. On one hand, sentient beings in this world have created too much negative karma, so perhaps eventually when the time comes, whether it is due to nature or the materialization or manifestation of the shared collective karma of sentient beings, in this particular context, as it is understood here, it might be inevitable. So no matter what happens, in any case, we should dedicate our virtuous roots with a kind heart, sincerely wishing for the well-being, and everyone should also frequently recite the aspiration of Samantabhadra and chant some mantras sincerely at home as well, especially the Vajra Amahat mantra, as well as various others, including some of Guru Padmasambhava's important mantras. These are very important indeed for your understanding. For a period of time, everyone has been reciting them quite diligently. Whether you should keep reciting them, decide for yourself. At the same time, from a worldly perspective, it is also very important to always carefully protect your own body and mind. There's nothing else for now. We'll stop here today.
Bandharangara Padma Sagarda Bandharangara Padma Sagarda Bandharangara Padma Sagarda